USS Curmudgeon, where the phasers are always set to stun and the Romulan ale always flows freely. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships in the Alpha Quadrant. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Delighted to have you with us tonight. And based on that preamble, I will give you one guess what we were talking about in the monologue. We talked about Star Trek at some length last week, and I've still been watching a lot of Star Trek this week. And you know what makes for a particularly jarring experience? Watching new Star Trek and old Star Trek back to back. And so that we're not trafficking in undefined terms here, I guess we need to establish a delineation between old Trek and new Trek. So for our present purposes, old Trek will describe all Star Trek up to and including the end of Enterprise in 2005. New Trek will describe everything that came after the end of the Kelvin Universe trilogy in 2016. And what category do those three films belong in? I don't know, and it doesn't matter because they make a convenient dividing line, and we are not talking about them anyway. There are two specific Star Trek-related phenomena that I have recently observed and upon which I wish to remark here at the outset. And these will lead us into the larger, more overarching thesis. The first one has to do with Wikipedia. The second one has to do with YouTube. So let's deal with Wikipedia first. Now, if you're a person who pays attention to this stuff, you're probably well aware that there is very little overlap between fans of new Trek and fans of old Trek. In fact, if the host can be forgiven for engaging in a bit of generalization, he would venture to say that most people who are longtime fans of old Trek find new Trek really quite insufferable, and they aren't bashful about saying so. But if you pull up the Wikipedia page for any of these new Trek shows, like your Star Trek Discovery, your Star Trek Strange New Worlds, your Star Trek Picard, your Star Trek Lower Decks, your Star Trek Prodigy, or even the mother of them all, the execrable, indefensible Starfleet Academy, you will be informed that each of these shows is wildly beloved by the professional mainstream critics, therefore they are awesome, and there's simply nothing else to talk about. But wait, Captain, you ruggedly handsome slab of masculine vigor, I hear you say. I happen to know lots of Star Trek fans who think post-2016 Trek sucks the ass of a Rigelian space donkey, so shouldn't that be something that bears mentioning on a Wikipedia page where the objective is supposed to be the dissemination of relevant knowledge on all topics? Well, dear viewer, I'm glad you asked, because the answer is yes. Yes, it does. But if you're on one of those article pages and you click over to the talk page, as the host has done on a regrettably large number of occasions in recent weeks and months, then you will see a whole other world opening up. A world where Wikipedia's own editorial guidelines are co-opted and weaponized by self-appointed studio gatekeepers with the aim of making sure no negative audience reactions are ever mentioned within the body of the article. It's a phenomenon you'll see play out over and over and over again on the talk page for each one of these new Trek properties, and you'll see the exact same 2 or 3 gatekeepers doing the gatekeeping. A person will show up in good faith with the purest of intentions, with no ideological axe to grind, who thinks, not incorrectly, that the article, particularly the reception section, would benefit from being a little bit more circumspect, perhaps making some passing mention of the very well-known, very real fact that lots of Star Trek fans can't stand this particular Star Wars product. And here is where the war of attrition begins. For the usual suspect gatekeepers, they emerge from the woodwork and they declare that, sorry, you can't put negative fan reactions in the article unless those reactions have been reported on by a mainstream source that Wikipedia deems to be credible. So now we are up against a phenomenon we've all seen play out on numerous occasions over the course of the past decade or so. Let's call it the Last Jedi phenomenon, where the mainstream critics are falling all over each other to give the most rapturously positive reviews that can be given toward a movie or a show that they perceive as being ideologically virtuous, which is often the only standard that comes into play, while the fans are standing around saying, but we think this sucks, actually. So to put it another way, Wikipedia's own policies create a paradigm where negative reactions against a big studio, big brand product can only be mentioned in the article if they are reported on by the very same Access Media critics who have a vested interest in portraying the opposite reality. And the gatekeepers always outlast the guy who wants to make the good faith edit, who eventually gives up and goes away because it's just not worth the effort. But here is the pernicious part of it. The policies the gatekeepers use to keep the articles free of negative fan reactions are not inherently bad policies, because fan reactions should be treated with caution, because they are self-selecting and they are potentially prone to malfeasant manipulation. But there is a big chasm of difference between enforcing a policy like that and declaring that all negative reactions are attributable to, drumroll please, come on, say it with me, review bombing. It is such a comforting notion, review bombing, because once you've gotten yourself past that first intellectual compromise, once you've decided you're willing to indulge the notion that all public criticism of this product is illegitimate, there's a whole series of other comforting delusions that lie directly downstream from that one. So if our show is getting bad audience scores, then obviously it's because of review bombing. And obviously the review bombers are all a bunch of sexist, racist, homophobes who just can't tolerate the oh-so-correct political agenda that's being pushed. And besides, all the mainstream professional critics, they say our show is great, so it really must be great. And this brings us along to the second half of this two-headed phenomenon, the one that's on the YouTube side, where I've seen more than a few videos from more than a few fairly high-profile creators in the Star Trek fandom space, whose theses are along the lines of, why would a conservative ever like Star Trek in the first place? Star Trek has always been a progressive show. Only people on the political left should ever have been attracted to it. And now we're getting down to the nub of the matter, because nobody who deeply knows and understands old Trek would feel the need to ask that question, for they already know the answer. Moreover, they would already know the difference between the allegorical thought experiments of old Trek and the dumb woke agenda pushing that defines new Trek. Is it correct to say old Trek had a progressive orientation? Sure it is. After all, it was presenting an idealized vision of future civilization in which we have solved all the problems of human nature that afflict us here in the real world. Was Gene Roddenberry a socialist? Of course he was. He was a very proud socialist. But here is the key difference. Irrespective of his own views and his own proclivities, the socialist Gene Roddenberry managed to build a fictional world that found broad appeal across all sectors of the demographic and political spectrum. And he built it out of a show that ran for only 3 seasons and 79 episodes, which never had very good ratings, which was often buried in a weekend death time slot, and which, by all conventional wisdom, should have been forgot about after NBC pulled the plug and canceled it in the summer of 1969. If you're my age, you were still years away from being born when Star Trek got canceled. This was the first and arguably the only case in the history of television where a show that found very little success in its first run became massively successful through syndication and reruns. So massively successful, in fact, that a decade after it got canceled, it got resurrected as a big budget theatrical film. Nothing like that has ever happened in the history of visual entertainment before. And you can see it all over the faces of the cast members when, just to name one example, they all got together and posed in front of the space shuttle test vehicle for the occasion of it being renamed from Constitution to Enterprise. Why was it renamed? Because a million goddamn Star Trek fans wrote letters to President Ford and demanded that the first space shuttle be named Enterprise. If Star Trek was a property whose appeal was limited solely to people on the political left who fully agreed with Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future, would a thing like that ever have happened? Spoiler alert, no, it would not have. But just look at those group pictures of the Star Trek cast standing in front of the Space Shuttle Enterprise in 1977. They can't wipe the shit-eating grins off their faces because this show they used to be in that got canceled 8 years ago, all of a sudden it's the most popular thing going. So popular that real-world spacecraft are actually being named after it. So by the time my living memory begins, Star Trek the Motion Picture is coming out in theaters. The reruns of the original show are so ubiquitous they are inescapable, and Star Trek isn't just an entertainment property, it is a cultural touchstone. And it doesn't occur to anybody that this is a franchise that should only be appealing to denizens of the political left. Why not? Because Gene Roddenberry, socialist though he was never trying to make a product that impugned the moral character of people who aren't socialists. And he was never trying to make a product that was only topical and relevant on the exact date when the episode premiered. If it was a show like that, it never would have transcended the time in which it was made. It never would have found a broad, devoted audience a decade after its cancellation. It never would have spawned a film franchise and a spin-off show and another spin-off show and another spin-off show and another spin-off show. And here's the secret. While Roddenberry may have been a card-carrying socialist progressive, he was also a man whose storytelling philosophy was decidedly rooted in the traditional, as much in the ancient allegorical thought experiments of Socrates and Plato as it was in the contemporary politics of the United States in the late 1960s. And what happened? Star Trek transcended being just a popular entertainment franchise. It even transcended being just a cultural touchstone. It transcended all the way to being a thing that materially affected, in a positive way, the trajectory of human civilization itself. Because the world started filling up with engineers and astronauts and physicists and other kinds of people who all said proudly, it was Star Trek that motivated me to enter this field. In fact, many of the greatest technological innovations of the last half century have arisen out of attempts by designers and engineers to build in real life the devices they saw on Star Trek back when they were kids. The flip-style cell phone and the tablet computer are just the two most obvious things we can point to, but the full list goes on so long it could make its own dedicated video. Do you think anybody watches today's version of Star Trek and gets similarly inspired? Of course they don't, and why would they? Today's Star Trek is just generic, grim, dark sci-fi action show. There is nothing that differentiates it from any other generic, grim, dark sci-fi action show, except the surface-level accoutrements that remind us this is Star Trek, even though it doesn't look like Star Trek or feel like Star Trek or have any apparent interest in posing allegorical questions and trusting the intelligence of the audience to provide their own answers. Today's crop of Hollywood creators, in Star Trek and elsewhere, would never give the audience that much credit. Today's Star Trek, to the extent it engages in allegory at all, it's not timeless allegory, it's not universal allegory, it's not allegory that will ever be comprehensible to future viewers who don't live in the United States in the 2020s. It's the laziest, most facile sort of allegory, whose message amounts to nothing more profound than, you should vote for the Democrats because the orange man is bad. And in case that message wasn't smacking you in the face quite hard enough, they fixed all that when they dragged out Stacey Abrams to portray the president of planet Earth on Star Trek Discovery. Imagine if there was an episode of the original series where frickin' Eugene McCarthy showed up playing a similar kind of walk-on role. It sounds pretty goddamn ridiculous, because it would be. But I want to get back to the side-by-side thing, because that's where the disparity between old Trek and new Trek really speaks for itself. I mentioned to my co-host one day recently that I had attempted to give Discovery a second chance. Why did I do that? I don't know. Chalk it up to masochism, I guess. I first attempted to watch Discovery when it came out back in 2017, and I really struggled to make it to the end of the first season, because it's a show about Black Mary Sue Space Jesus and very little else, who is also Spock's secret stepsister, because even biracial extraterrestrials have to have all their achievements co-opted by a strong, powerful woman of color. When I tried to watch it here this second time, it was even worse. You know why? Because all of the thinly veiled political references from 2017, 18, 19, 20 seem totally dated now, because of course they do. And also because nobody ever tuned in to Star Trek to watch women crying. And the next episode of Star Trek Discovery I see that features no female tear squirting is going to be the first one. This is the sharpest departure between old Trek and new Trek. In old Trek, problems were solved by a group of competent, highly skilled professionals sitting in a briefing room proposing solutions in calm, measured, dignified tones. In new Trek, problems are solved by women crying. No episode can reach its denouement without lots of emotionally incontinent characters engaging in lots of performative histrionics. I mean, for Christ's sakes, maybe Starfleet was onto something back in the 80s when they had the ship's psychotherapist be part of the command crew on the bridge. And also, when we want to add extra dramatic intensity in new Star Trek, we just have somebody say fuck or shit. But here's where I decided to do a bit of a science experiment. I said, let's do a direct side-by-side comparison. I've just watched a bunch of episodes of Star Trek Women Crying, the continuing adventures of Black Mary Sue Space Jesus. So what would happen if I transitioned straight from that to my favorite Star Trek ever, which would be the middle seasons of The Next Generation? First episode I turned on was yesterday's Enterprise, Season 3, Episode 15, the one where the Enterprise D encounters the Enterprise C when it's just emerged from a time-travel-y wormhole thingy. And you know what I realized? 44 minutes later, when that episode ended, I had watched the entire thing attentively, the whole way through. Didn't check my phone, didn't check the laptop, didn't rearrange my sock drawer, didn't even get up to pet the dog. Because this episode of a syndicated TV show from 36 years ago held my attention from start to finish. And not just because of the quality of the script and the performances, but also because the show was not bombarding me with sensory overload. When you watch new Star Trek, if a woman isn't crying, Then there is something exploding. The camera never holds still. The lighting is so grim dark, you often can't see much of anything. There is a jump cut every 2.3 seconds because I guess we can't rely on the actors to remember their lines and play out a scene in a traditional way anymore. And there is a perverse irony here. For the current day, conventional wisdom says you have to have lots of shaky cam, lots of quick cuts, lots of emotional caterwauling, and lots of big damn explosions in order to redirect the viewer's attention away from their second screen and their third screen. But the actual result of that is you force the viewer to turn away and seek a reprieve from all the sensory information that you are overloading them with. Meanwhile, back in 1990, the lighting is all even and natural. The camera never moves unless there's a reason why it needs to. Scenes are played out in single takes that last several minutes, shockingly. And in terms of dramatic tension and audience engagement, the show is doing more than you could do with all the crying women and all the exploding spaceships in the whole wide galaxy. I want to close by talking about an episode of Voyager that I watched this morning, quite by accident, just because I happened to see it mentioned in some list somewhere. I wouldn't even rate myself as a Voyager fan, generally speaking, nor a Deep Space Nine fan. By the time those shows came out, I was suffering from a bit of Star Trek fatigue, as a lot of other people were too. So I never watched either one of those shows during its initial run, and to this day, I've only seen selected episodes here and there. The episode is called Blink of an Eye, episode 12, season 6, in which Voyager enters orbit around a planet that sits in the bottom of a very severe gravity well, so the temporal frame of reference changes drastically the farther away you get from the planet, such that for each day Voyager spends in orbit, over 100 years pass for the inhabitants down on the surface. On the day Voyager arrives, the people on the planet are living a Stone Age hunter-gatherer existence. They see Voyager as a bright light in the night sky. They conclude that it's a god, and they start making offerings to it. By the next day, they are living in the Middle Ages, and Voyager has become the focal point of their religion and their first modes of scientific inquiry. By the following day, they are in the Victorian period, generally speaking. They've got telescopes and primitive radios. They can see that the thing in the night sky is actually a space vehicle. And all of their technological advancements are done with a mind to attempting to communicate with any occupants that might be on board. Another day goes by. Now they have achieved spaceflight, which they did just so they could fly up and visit this mysterious space vehicle, which they succeed in doing. Eventually, they determine that this object in the sky around which they have built their culture and their religion and their technology was just a spacecraft from another planet that got stranded in orbit around their planet for a period that, for them, only amounted to a week. But it was over 1,000 years for the people on the surface. And this is a classic Roddenberry-style Star Trek story. The secular humanist subtext is certainly right there if you're looking for it. The message being that oftentimes we build religions around strange things we see in the sky that ultimately wind up having mundane explanations. But there's no reason why the viewer has to draw that conclusion. A viewer of different theological predilections might view it another way, and that is neither a good or a bad thing. There are many potential conclusions, none of them right or wrong. That's what respecting the audience's intelligence actually looks like. But as I'm watching this episode, I'm thinking, hold on a second. If we substitute Earth for the gravity planet and Star Trek itself for Voyager, doesn't the metaphor still work just as well? Star Trek is the shining beacon in the sky, the thing toward which we strive, the thing we attempt to emulate, a thing that motivates and animates some of our greatest and most important endeavors. Granted, it's no substitute for crying women and big explosions. But as someone who's been around long enough to have a functional understanding of why Star Trek was once a thing of actual civilizational importance, I think I like viewing it that way. And with that, I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention as ever, and transmit you into the loving care of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
At the core of Star Trek is Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future. So much of science fiction is about a dystopian society with human civilization having crumbled. He had an affirmative, shining, positive view of the future. George Takei. Oh my.
Oh my.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Tonight, this very evening, we are going to discuss the transatlantic accent a little bit because, I don't know, it just tickled my pickle. Also, it ties straight into Spider Noir, which is, well, we'll get into
Don't
that.
I sound erudite when I use the mid-Atlantic accent?
Right? And then you've got
It's
the
not-
other one,
it's
see?
It's not quite English. It's not quite American. It's just sitting right there in the middle of the Atlantic.
Right? Oh, wow. That is absolutely amazing. So where do you want to start? We got a couple of things we can do in news if you'd like. Apparently, Israel took a castle, like an old one. Apparently, it's been
Did
there
they?
a while.
Which castle?
Hold on. It's actually in the little roundup over here at the bottom of the ticker. Just says historic castle.
Oh, we could talk about the World Cup and how most Americans still don't know what it is or that we're hosting it.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask why.
That's also an excellent question because, granted,
Well, no, hold on. I understand why we're hosting it. We're the best country on earth. I mean, of course they'd want us to host it. But what I want to know is why would we talk about it?
Yeah, and also, why would FIFA assign such wildly unrealistic ticket prices rather than assigning ticket prices that are more in line to the level of soccer fandom that actually exists in the United States of America? I know it's been very fashionable for a lot of years to say, well, it's only a matter of time before soccer becomes the most popular sport in the United States because we've got so many immigrants coming in all the time. They've been saying this ever since I've been alive. They've been saying this, and soccer still stubbornly is not one of the top 4 most popular sports in the country.
They come in, they see football, and they're hooked. They watch basketball, and they're hooked. Soccer is freaking boring, bro. They take one baseball. The only reason baseball still exists in our society today is because of schools. If it had not been put in every single gym everywhere across the world from the dawn of freaking time, as far as most of these schools are concerned, it wouldn't be a thing. It is not interesting enough. The only people that care about it are autistic mathematicians with a penchant for psychology. Where'd that come from? That tastes like peanut butter. I didn't even know I felt that way.
Well, yeah, and baseball's stature on the sporting landscape is still largely a vestige of the station it occupied 100 or so years ago, when there was a diamond on every single empty lot, on every single corner in every town in the country, and every little boy, all he wanted to do after school was play baseball. Sometimes before school, he wanted to play baseball. It's impossible to even describe and do it justice how much of a cultural touchstone baseball once was in this country, which it obviously is not anymore. I couldn't tell you the last time I saw kids playing a pickup baseball game. I don't think I've ever seen kids playing a pickup baseball game in my entire lifetime. But the fact that it retains the same level of interest that it does, though I think it's been degraded quite a bit, if I'm being honest, is
Pickup
because
games are basketball or football nowadays.
Yeah, it's because of that echo of that cultural memory that still exists, and we always talk about it. Cultural memory is a hell of a stubborn thing, and baseball also, I think, retains a lot of interest, not just because of the douchebag stat geeks who have been trying their damnedest to ruin the game for the last 20 or 30 years, but also because it is a game that lends itself so well to historical comparison, probably better than most other games do. A great hitter from today can be directly compared to a great hitter from 80, 90, 100 years ago more conveniently than you can in most other sports. Like in football, for an example, an NFL all-star in the 1940s wouldn't be able to get on the field for a junior high school team today, because that's just how much the game has changed and how much the physicality of the players has changed. Baseball, not so much. And baseball also has it enjoys a station in our history that no other sport does. Football history will never be as prominent as baseball history, and neither will basketball history or hockey history or any damn other kind of history. College sports, whatever sport you want to pick, none of them have the historical stature and have become part of the national mythology to the same extent that baseball has, and that's the thing that baseball is still clinging to today, that gives it its prominence and relevance on the sporting landscape.
Here's what gives baseball its almost indelible, possibly indelible, imprint on American culture. I'm a 47-year-old man. My father is still alive. I have an 19-year-old kid, and if he had a kid tomorrow in 5 years, it's possible all of us would still be alive. And the one game that all of us know how to play because it's baseball is baseball. Any one of us might have played soccer or freaking any other game out there, basketball, football, cricket. But the chances of 5 people in the same room all having one thing in common is very slim. And that is one thing almost every single American in history can say they know a little bit about baseball. And in some circles, that little bit makes them an expert in comparison to the other people in the room, right? The fact that they know when and out actually occurs.
And you're right that it ties families together in the same way that, in a larger sense, it ties the society together. My son and daughter-in-law moved in with us 2 weeks ago. Every night we all sit around and watch the ball game together, and there's nothing else we would rather be doing. And that, watching a ball game with each other leads to personal interaction, leads to all manner of different things. Any excuse for the whole family to sit around in the same room interacting with each other is a good excuse and a good thing. And that's when sports are at their best, when they unite families and they unite generations, and it's not forced. And it used to.
I'm just saying. It's as long as it's not a forced, we're going to get together and watch the game thing. That can be very off-putting to people. When you try to force the comradeship, the friendliness, that thing, that's really weird to me, man.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very fun at all.
It's not, because I could care less. And I've got this particular buddy of mine who's an absolute football fanatic, and I like football about as much as I like baseball. Do I know anything about it? Not really. Can I sit and have a conversation about it? Sure. I don't care though. It's not going to change my morning tomorrow as to what happened in football today. And he's not just football; he's college football, right? So he's like super hardcore.
Oh, that's even worse. Yeah, the college football people are super duper hardcore.
And apparently, I spent most of my life camouflaging myself as a super hardcore college football fan because I really like the Georgia Bulldogs mascot and I love their colors. And I really like the fact that you can find them all over the place here, and I look fucking great in them. And so I had a tendency of wearing UGA stuff as opposed to any other team because I liked the colors. And that was it. I just looked good in those colors, and that's the end of that conversation. Nothing further than that. Oh, yeah. Yep. I love tailgating, camping, tailgating, that whole thing. I just kind of accidentally slipped in with a whole bunch of fans so I could go camping in a parking lot instead of by the river by myself, right? Go eat fucking food with people and walk over there and get me a fucking latte when I get ready to, right?
Yeah, and coming back to the World Cup, and all the foreign visitors that we're going to have coming in, a lot of them are completely blown away by the whole concept of tailgating, because it's a thing that just doesn't exist in other countries.
As American as apple pie, as American as the blues, as American as apple pie. The question is why?
The idea of sitting in the parking lot having a cookout in the back of your truck is just they are so gobsmacked by it the first time they see it, and it's always so funny to watch, because for us it's just what you do at sports games. It's our cultural shorthand. It's just what we do. It's second nature for us. And then you get a foreigner who comes along and say, "Wow, you just cook food in the parking lot and
Oh no,
sit
that's not
around
all.
and
That's not
yeah.
it. There's so much more to a good tailgating, right? It's not just food. They are you're not permitted to sell alcohol in the parking lot, right? There's no rules against consuming alcohol in the parking lot, provided you're actually on your own vehicle and not behind the wheel. There's like weird little
Yeah.
carve outs so that you can like be in like a travel
And
trailer or something.
and as long as you're not spilling over into the adjacent parking spaces, all that good stuff.
Right, which actually gets overlooked quite a bit under certain circumstances. I think you can pay for additional parking and it's fine, right?
Yeah.
My point
Yeah,
being, it's tailgating is not just cooking a few burgers. I mean, that is the bare basics of it. I'm talking about people who load up their entire family for 4 generations. Everybody puts on UGA clothes and they all go climb in this big ass freaking truck where they hook a gooseneck trailer up to it and drag it to the stadium. They have
Oh
brought
yeah.
$700 worth of groceries, beer, drinks, chips, you freaking name it. And they have every intention of not bringing any of that crap home.
Yeah. And those are the people who make tailgating into a science and an art form. Those are the kind of people for whom the tailgate is the actual game. The tailgate is the thing we're here to do. The ball game is just a secondary thing we do that after we've
The ball
eaten all our
game's the
food
reason.
and drunk all our beer. But
That's all it is. The reason.
Yeah. It's the excuse to have the tailgate.
No. It's the excuse to have the family together. And you make the tailgating as fun as possible so that the family wants to do it together. And so when somebody marries into the family and they find out, holy shit, these people are serious about let me tell you, there's like weird traditions in these tailgating cultures, right?
Oh yes.
If let's say you're in at least in Georgia. In Texas is a little bit different, but in Georgia, the old man goes to the ball game. The oldest son runs the grill and doesn't actually get to see the game this week. The rest of them go to the game with the oldest son's kids, takes care of everybody, pays for everything while they're in there. And then when they come out and the tailgating has already started at like 6 a.m. that morning, I mean, they leave.
Oh, yes.
It's all arranged. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. They know how it's supposed to go, and everybody does what they're supposed to do and then goes and screws off to the stadium or wanders around other tailgaters and stuff. And these people get to know each other. They go to all the same games, and even opponents' tailgaters become part of the crew when it comes to the tailgating part. It doesn't matter what happens inside the stadium so much as it matters that we keep everybody together, safe and happy and sound and fed. And here, do you want some more chips? I got a beer in the cooler.
Yeah, and it's sad the way it's happened here in San Diego, because we used to have one of the continent's most legendary tailgating scenes, but little by little it kind of diminished and it's all gone now. Because back when I was coming up, back before 2003, 2004, when the Padres and the Lightning Bolt team, whose name I refuse to say, both played in the same stadium, then we had kick-ass tailgates before, all 81 baseball games and all 8 football games, and even throw San Diego State in there too. That's 8 more college games. But you could not beat our tailgating scene to save your life, especially if you're into Mexican food. But little by little, it got knocked down. The Padres moved downtown, and there's not really any parking lot down there that lends itself to tailgating the same way that North America's largest parking lot, as we used to have with Jack Murphy / Qualcomm Stadium, no longer exists. And then of course the Lightning Bolt team, whose name I refuse to say, fucked off and moved to LA, and they tore the stadium down. And now that whole tailgating culture is a vestige of the past. It is gone by the wayside. It doesn't exist anymore. Kids that are coming up today, just they have to hear about it from their parents and their grandparents, and that's a sad thing that we've lost culturally, I think.
That's if they hear about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I'm more sad about that than I am about the goddamn Lightning Bolt team fucking off and moving to LA.
I'm thinking I actually come across something related to this conversation once before, and I can't remember who it was that said to me, we were talking about tailgating, and he's from like Northern California over there somewhere. And he was like, oh, yeah, we used to have this huge freaking parking lot with this huge damn stadium. We used to have the best culture you could possibly imagine. Like, everybody went tailgating at least once a season, if not every freaking week, right? And I was like, that sounds awesome. He said, but two things happened. One, stadium closed down, and the other venues were either farther away or didn't have quite enough parking to deal with the venue. And beyond that, they also passed a law in California that narrowed the width of the parking spaces and shortened it. And so people who had these big ass trucks could no longer go and, park in one spot and pull their trailer into another spot and pay for two spaces, and that'd be fine. Now the trailer hangs off on both sides. The truck's hanging off in one corner because the trailer's next to them, and it doesn't work anymore.
If there's anything you like about your life, the California government will find a way to put a stop to it.
I've heard my whole life. I've heard my whole life. As California goes, so goes the nation 10 years later. And if anything, that's sped up quite a bit.
And that's another area, I think, where our European friends really don't have a well-developed understanding of what they're talking about, because we've been over already how much when they first experience U.S. style tailgating, they love it. They think it's incredible. They think it's wonderful. They think it's the greatest thing they ever saw. But they also complain incessantly about the fact that, well, why do American stadiums all have such big parking lots surrounding them? I'm going to tell you right now, dude, if you want to have the tailgating thing that you're so impressed with, you have to have the big ass parking lot. You can't have it both ways. You have to pick one, my dude.
Yep. So let's transition at this point.
Okay.
If you got more to say, go for it. I'm just saying.
No, you go ahead. Transition is fine.
All right. Spider Noir, right? This whole thing, right? So, first of all, I love Nicolas Cage. I am throwing no shade at this man for anything at all. If he wants to go out there and stare at a camera for an hour and a half for an episode, I'll probably sit and watch it just on the respect of his chops, right?
Yep.
I might not understand it, but art is art. And his choice to do this role, I accept it. I don't know a whole lot about Spider Noir. I had a buddy of mine that was really deep into the comics and stuff, the guy who left the really good comics in the bathroom. I'll point this out. I did not find any Spider Noir comics in that man's bathroom. Ever.
What period are the Spider Noir comics from?
I'm not even 100% sure on that. I just know that I remember them popping up in I want to say 99 to 2000.
Because I think
the weirdest thing.
I think I mentioned last week that I don't remember ever having heard of Spider Noir up until I saw the what's it called, Into the Spider-Verse, the cartoon movie where they had all the alternate Spider-Men show up, and Nicolas Cage as Spider Noir was one of them. But I don't have any recollection of ever seeing that character in comic books back when I was a comic book kid.
No. 2008 apparently.
Oh, okay. That makes sense then.
Yeah, that does make sense. But I mean, we're still talking 30 years ago. I mean, almost 30 years ago. And
yeah, so it was go ahead.
One of the things that gave me problems with Spider Noir is from the outset, the field, the setting, the enemies, the clothes, everything involved in it made me think Batman from start to finish. Early Batman
100%.
art, comics. Yep. All 100%. And I was like, from Jump Street, I feel like this exists only because a drunk comic book writer was sitting in a bar trying to figure out what to do next. And the guys next to him, not realizing who he was like, what do you reckon would happen if Batman was Spider-Man? Yeah, that sounds really cool. And he wrote it down on a napkin, stuffed it in his pocket, and went back to drinking, and woke up the next morning panicking in the elevator about what he was supposed to pitch, and found it in his pocket. That's how we ended up with Spider Noir. I swear to God.
It's almost like the same thing, and stick with me here, as Star Trek, where it's just a hollowed out version of a different IP that's being worn as a surface level skin suit. because aside from the most basic visual accoutrements in terms of the mask with the big eyes and the slinging of the webs, I don't see anything whatsoever in that show that makes me think of any connection with any version of Spider-Man or the Spider-Man story that I have ever seen before. It seems to have, as you mentioned, far more in common with Batman, and it's hard not to conclude that that's what they were actually going for, is exactly what you said. What would happen if Spider-Man was Batman? It seems like that was the jumping off point for the whole writing process.
And they don't understand why Batman is a unit, right? They don't get why he is the premier superior hero of all time. Superman ain't got shit on him. And what it is Batman does not have any superpowers. He's just rich as hell and very obsessive.
And as you mentioned earlier, he is also willing to hurt people in order to take them off of the criminal playing field.
Yes, sir. He will break their arms and legs. And I made this point earlier. See, usually we don't chat before a show because we want to keep our thoughts separate. But the whole Spider Noir thing just kind of popped up. And then we've been talking about it all day.
Oh, yeah.
And Batman will break a man's arms and legs to figure out who his boss is. And then go to his boss and break his arms and legs to find out who his boss is. He'll try not to kill anybody, but I mean, it's no guarantee that there won't be collateral damage in the process.
And that was actually the one thing I liked about the way Zack Snyder depicted the Batman character. And I'm thinking specifically of the scene in Batman v Superman where he busts into the room where all the bad guys are in, and he is just literally cracking skulls and killing and maiming motherfuckers right and left. And yeah, that's what Batman does. I like that. That's a good depiction of Batman that is true to the source material. And it's refreshing to see once in a while in the post-Adam West world where you don't see Batman act that way very often. Michael Keaton's Batman never crushed anybody's skull, but I like that Ben Affleck's Batman did.
Yeah, I dig it. I like it darker. Batman's supposed to be dark. It's supposed to be disturbing. It is the horror franchise of the comic world. And not the horror in the sense of spooky ghosties, but horror in the sense of the shit that goes bump in the night, the real shit that's out there bumping in the night, right? And Batman's got all of its number, and they'll break both their arms and legs and leave them a quivering mass. And I made the point. Which method is more effective in policing? Spider-Man sticking folks to a freaking lamppost and leaving the evidence on the ground for the police, or Batman breaking into a human trafficking ring and breaking the boss's arms and legs and getting his boss out of it and then going and dealing with that guy? Which one's more effective for the people of the city? Now, I realize two different cities, Metropolis versus Gotham, but the concept remains the same. What is the social weight of this?
In a utilitarian world, you have to prefer the Batman model, because under the Spider-Man model, there is still the possibility that a corrupt prosecutor will just let the criminals go, as we see happen far too often in real life in recent years. But Batman removes that from the equation. There's no prosecutorial discretion in Batman's world because that guy's arms and legs are broken, irrespective of whether he actually stands trial and gets convicted.
Exactly. And so when you get to the other end of all the math on it, what you find is Batman creates possible lawsuits, but against who? It's just injured folks out in the world that got jumped by a gangster. It's chalked up in America. It's chalked up to a shit happens category. I hope you got insurance, which most of these people are low-level gangsters and probably don't have insurance. On the other hand, the people Spider-Man's picking up, not only are they hale and hearty when they make it to the police now have to take this really questionable evidence that was just in a pile under this guy like he was being framed and give it to a prosecutor who has to hire all sorts of legal help to try to get a conviction based off of what appears to be a setup. On its surface, you tell somebody, hey, I found this dude in a web bag with all this evidence under him. and no jury
yeah,
on earth is going to convict.
And there's still any number of procedural hurdles you could run into as far as evidence being not admitted,
Right.
or we know what happens with judges and prosecutors, for God's sake.
So what we're going to end up with is an entire task force like the DEA, whose entire purpose is to try to put together the evidence so as to be able to gather legitimate legal evidence against the people that Spider-Man's already captured. They have to release them. They can't necessarily even arrest them there's some suspicion here for sure. Right. We can investigate. I don't know if we can arrest this man based off of the fact that there's a 45, an ID, and $60 in somebody else's wallet under him, and he's hanging from a lamp. I don't think that's going to pass the muster when it comes to going to court. And so you have to have all of these other government officiaries whose whole job is to try to figure out how to convict these people. They're obviously guilty, but the chain of evidence has been broken, and there's no witnesses, and nobody knows who did it. It's this dude who dresses up like a fucking spider in a luchador costume, swinging around in the damn streets with some kind of goddamn wrist mechanism. What a nut job. You can't trust him.
And since I'm thinking about it already, and as weird as I feel about complimenting Zack Snyder twice in the same 10-minute period, since we're talking about Spider Noir and attempts at doing black and white things, did you happen to ever watch when the Zack Snyder Justice League cut came out, the version of it that he released in black and white?
Nope.
Because I thought that was a much better attempt at doing an actual true,
period
faithful piece. Black and white product, period piece, yes, than we saw from Spider Noir, and which we also saw in Oppenheimer. But you go ahead.
I'm going to freak the fuck up on Nicolas Cage attempting to do a transatlantic accent. It does not work, does not land, he should have just used his own voice and not even attempted that Sam Slade bullshit.
Yeah, I'm not even quite sure what he's going for with that voice, but it's bad.
I swear to God, it sounds like what's his name? The dude who was in the Maltese Falcon.
Humphrey Bogart?
Humphrey Bogart, fucking thank you. That shit's been on the tip of my tongue for like 4 hours now. Okay, so it sounds like in some scenes he's trying to imitate the Humphrey Bogart Maltese Falcon diction. And then in other scenes, it's like he's trying to be the flippant Spider-Man quips, but he's an old man and those are kid quips, right?
And the best voice to use would be just Nicolas Cage. That would sound great.
Yes. And the fact that it sways back and forth in there might have some relevance long term when it comes to like piecing together the finished series. But I don't think so. I just don't see it. I see it as him playing with the character, trying to figure out what to do, and I respect him for it. That's fine. It's just a weird thing to kind of put at the forefront of some scenes, especially when they're doing like the bar scenes and he's starting to kind of talk like this, you know what I mean? Like he's trying to do the accent and it's not quite sticking. It's not quite going. It doesn't quite work.
You should lay your theory on the audience, because I think it's an interesting road to go down about how you think this is a test case for living actors and artificial intelligence.
Let me cover one thing first because it's pertinent to what made me think this. They seem to have used screen filmed scenes for the driving scenes inside the car. Rather than using modern filming techniques, they actually seem to have used
rear projection,
a rear projection screen behind the car to appear to be driving down the road. It was a brilliant tactic in 1922, not so brilliant in 2026, right?
Yeah.
And I understand, perhaps, because you could save a shit ton of money that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those scenes where it showed Nicolas Cage at an angle and he was sitting there, and they're using a filter to make him look a little bit older or younger, maybe. I don't know which way that goes right now. I mean, he's like 10 million years old. So,
right.
And something about his movement wasn't Nicolas Cage. It wasn't anything about the face. The face was flawless. In fact, it was a little too flawless, but it was a fidget that wasn't Nicolas Cage. And I started watching from that point, and I noticed in scenes that are really tight up closes on the face and hands, it's Nicolas Cage. Some other scenes, though, the Nicolas Cage acting is like a caricature of Nicolas Cage. It's everything that's Nicolas Cage, and all of it's a little too heavy and hard, right? And I think what we might be looking at with this series is close-up work being done by the actor, motion capture being done as much as possible, and the motion capture actor being used to film actual scenes in other situations, and AI being used to fill in the difference between them. Meaning, you don't actually need Nicolas Cage on set, but for what? A couple of hours every other day or so?
Yeah, and then his digital doppelganger can do the rest of it.
Can do absolutely everything else. Yep. And if that's the case, I hope we find out about it later. That's the case. This could be the modern firebrand of a revolution when it comes to filmmaking.
Tootie Bug, am I saying that right?
It's enough for government work. What you do?
I am glad you brought up Hitchcock, because that is exactly where I was going to go. And Squatch, I mentioned this to you earlier as well, that when we went into this watching Spider Noir, I was hopeful, optimistic that it was going to be an actual good faith effort to make something that is actually tries to harken back to the golden age of film noir. Back in probably the 1930s is the golden age of film noir, we might say. And a lot of people who became really big stars got their start back in film noir. I'm thinking specifically of Bob Mitchum got his start in film noir, did a lot of film noir. So did Cary Grant got his start in film noir. Bette Davis got her start in film noir. And I was hoping that we were going to see a more faithful attempt at that kind of filmmaking. We didn't see that, obviously, as it turned out. We saw a thing that was, they filmed it in color, and then they just took the color out. And you can't call a thing black and white when you shot it in color. You just can't. But that's not the point. The point is that for people who are in the audience likely to be watching us right now, the place they are most likely to have seen a faithful representation of film noir is The Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents, from the very tail end of the 50s and the early 60s, because those guys still wanted to make film noir. But if you wanted to make film noir in 1960, you had to make it on television, because the movies were all in color now. So if you wanted to engage in that kind of filmmaking / storytelling, you had to do it in the context of a TV show. Even Hitchcock, as lofty as his reputation was, nobody wanted to pay for him to make a black and white Hitchcock picture anymore, because nobody wanted to see black and white movies in the theater anymore. The only place that people still watch lots of stuff in black and white was on television. And so that's where the tail end of the whole genre of film noir wound up. And film noir it's defined, it has very clearly defined attributes. First of all, there should be no daylight exterior scenes in any film noir. And the scenes that you do shoot, there normally is a single light source. The lighting is very harsh. It's often top down or bottom up, never from the side. You are always trying to create very severe contrast.
Or backlit.
Yes. Or you want a contrast, a very sharp contrast between light and dark, and you want shadows to do a lot of your storytelling and create a lot of your visual aesthetic. And
what you don't see is just as important as what they're showing you.
Correct.
The sounds, the things going on around you that you know are occurring, that you can hear but you can't see. These are also part of the story, and the noir framework makes you focus on that type of stuff because you can't see shit.
Yeah. But as soon as I pulled up Amazon Prime and went to Spider Noir, there was a bit of a letdown right when I saw that you have the option of watching it in what they call authentic black and white or full color. And it's not authentic black and white. If you shot a thing in authentic black and white, you wouldn't be able to watch it in color because it would look like shit. If you faithfully shoot a thing in black and white that's designed to be watched in black and white, you have to use certain film stock. You have to use certain lenses. You have to light your scenes in the way that we were just talking about them being lit. You can't just shoot the thing in color and then take the color out and call it authentic black and white. I think that's incredibly disappointing.
It looks muddy.
It does. And
there's too many shades. There's not supposed to be
too many shades of gray, not enough black and white.
Right. There shouldn't be any ambiguity between the lit and the unlit. The unlit is black as the darkest night, and the lit is so bright it almost hurts your eyes. And it's
exactly. And it's such a powerful device when it's done correctly. And I encourage everyone who hasn't seen very many of those films from the golden age of noir, I want to say, and I guess we have to mention the Hays Code here, because many of the best film noir pictures were made in that period right before the Hays Code came into force in 1937. And so they are much more violent and sexier and deal with subject matter that you probably wouldn't necessarily expect a picture from 1935 or 1936 to be dealing in, but they do, because they could still do whatever they want, because the Hays Code hadn't come into force yet. And it would have been nice if it never did come into force, and film noir could have kept on operating without the constraints that the Hays Code imposed. But I guess sometimes we just can't have nice things. But there's nothing wrong with watching movies from the 1930s when they are the exemplar of the thing you're trying to watch. Yeah. In order to understand why Spider Noir is not film noir or anything resembling it, you have to go back and watch some actual film noir. Or
exactly.
A fitting substitute is some Twilight Zone episodes or some episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, because they were still making their stuff on television in the same sort of aesthetic school that produced the golden age of film noir 25 years prior to that.
Right. And there was just barely enough money around in television at the time to allow that type of artistry to take place. And I'm not sure you would find that in most situations. Like you said, they filmed this in color and then used a program to pull the color out, and it leaves everything muddy and drab instead of being stark and high lit.
They just desaturated the color out of the frame and then ran it through some digital film grain filter in order to try and make it look older. And it just comes off wrong. It's nothing about it is right.
So let me be clear about this. I have no problem with the artistic choice of doing the things the way they did. And I can kind of understand why it is set up the way it is because most people in the price range that are going to watch this and care are not old enough to have experienced true noir.
Right.
And if they have, it's because somebody's father or uncle or older brother or something was like, no, you got to check that. You got to look at that. You got to, go watch some Maltese Falcon, go look at, that type of stuff. And without that extra little oomph, most modern kids under the age of 30 have very little understanding of what noir means. All right, perfect example. Have you ever played Red Dead Redemption 2?
I have not.
All right.
I'm vaguely familiar with it, though.
Right. Red Dead Redemption 2 ostensibly is a Western. But when you actually get in and start playing the missions and doing the things, you realize, or I did about halfway through the game, this isn't a Western at all. All of it is gangster noir. All you got to do is throw a black and white filter over the top of it, and it is straight up right outside of Chicago, gangsters banging up in the damn streets and having fights and the whole nine. You're stealing horses, you're stealing moonshine, you're running guns, you're doing all that stuff. You know how many horse missions there are? You literally herd one group of cows. You go and capture a handful of horses, and there's a few other horses in the game that you can go break and have as mounts. Other than that, you're shooting, blowing stuff up, robbing trains, hijacking stagecoaches. You're doing all the gangster stuff. It is not a Western. That is a turn of the century gangster noir. And the first, I had a buddy about it, absolutely loves the game. And he's like, God, I love the Western, everything, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's not a Western, it's a gangster noir. And he's like,
Yeah.
and like he stopped playing and just sat there and thought about it. Like I saw the gears turn in his head, click. I hate you. Suddenly he couldn't unsee it.
I was remiss also in not mentioning Edward G. Robinson, because he did some of his first greatest work in the genre of film noir and made himself a gigantic superstar for a great number of years out of it. And it's interesting to note, I think, that many of the actors and actresses who first gained fame within that subgenre, they have kind of freaky looking faces. Big-eyed, freaky looking face. Bob Mitchum has a weird looking face with big eyes. Edward G. Robinson has a weird looking face with big eyes. Betty Davis has a weird looking face with big eyes. And those are the kind of faces that look so indescribably weirdly awesome when you shoot them, when they're lit that way and you're, on film stock with the right lenses. And that's much of what went into that whole genre, was making weird looking faces look unforgettable and making stars out of the owners of those faces, which happened in a lot of cases.
You asked about the origin story, and I looked it up during the interim, and there are two, of course, because the Spider Noir series, the Spider Noir series we're watching today has very little to do with the Spider Noir series that was laid out before. So let's go with the comic origins first. Okay. In 2008, Marvel comic miniseries Marvel Noir, the story takes place in a darker alternate universe of 1933. Peter Parker, a young idealist working as a photographer's assistant for Ben Urich, is investigating a smuggling ring led by Norman Osborn, the Goblin. He gains his powers after a mystic spider bites him, granting him strength and the agility of a spider. All right. Now where's the other one? I just read the other one. I seen it. Oh yeah. The live-action series Spider Noir is a 1930s superhero noir mashup on Prime Video. Nicolas Cage plays Ben Riley, an aging, down-on-his-luck private investigator who operates as the city's only vigilante. So, I'm not sure as to the story when you get into the actual lore of it, but those are very different premises.
They are. And as I was watching the 2 episodes that I got through, I found myself wondering what time period was actually being depicted, because if we're going for a noir thing, then obviously we're trying to ground ourselves in the 1930s, but yet all of the clothes and all of the vehicles I see are from the 1940s, which I guess is an inconvenient thing to bring up.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, Depression era vehicles are very hard to come by. I mean, I get it. You have a better chance of finding like Model Ts and early 20s things than you have of Depression era vehicles.
I've sometimes imagined that that's a line of work I would enjoy, being one of the guys who supplies vintage automobiles to movie studios. I think that's probably a really fun job.
So I've talked about the accent, the way it swings. I've talked about the weird way it affects the dialogue. He's an old man, down on his luck, out of work, roustabout. The only talent he has is falling in dog shit every chance he gets. And so he's in the middle of everything that's happening. And so a detective is about the only thing he could be. What he doesn't do, what never happens, like they've even got like a musical number in the first episode, and it is completely wrong. All right, let me attack this one for a sec because this bothered me. They've got this super hot Asian chick who does this song bit, but if you ever watch a noir picture, when they do the song bit, inevitably she is either standing there in her shoulder length pearl black or white gloves with the satin fingers, and she's got her 2-foot long cigarette holder, and she's singing up there at the mic doing that little sway, and you get the full body image with the back out of seeing all the people just utterly enraptured by her voice and her doing
and
the
she's
thing.
lit directly from the top.
Directly from the top, like they've got some goblin up there handling the sun. And then or the other possible noir song setup is where she's walking around on the stage and the lighting is contrasting back and forth, all wild and wonky, kind of in time with the song that's going on, and inevitably she climbs on top of the piano, looks down at the dude playing and smiles and, you know, makes flirty little eyes at everybody around constantly. None of this happens. None of that, any of that thing with the whole speakeasy chick singing at the juke joint, none of that. All it is a tight frame on her, then him, then him, then her, then her, then him, then him, then her. And you see nothing but like the edge of her gloves and everything's above the neckline. And it's, oh God, the whole time I literally was sitting here hitting my vape, and I yelled out to my wife. I was like, "Hey baby, I need you to do me a favor." She's like, "What?" I said, "Remind me to apologize to Captain Curmudgeon. I didn't mean to do this to him."
Yeah, and if they were doing it, not to belabor the point, but if they were doing it in a style that was a faithful homage to that genre of cinema in that period, you wouldn't shoot that musical number anything like that. You would start from a long shot, and you would keep that shot the entire time, and you would push in very, very, very slowly until the song was over. I also was highly disappointed with a couple of the musical selections because I felt like they started out fairly faithful to the period, but then all of a sudden there's fucking electric guitars and synthesizers going off. What are we doing here? Are we in the 1930s or not?
AI is responsible for this. That's another part of it. Okay, the sounds in the movie, the sounds in the show sound like they were literally taken directly from old film copy of mid-30s people doing mid-30s things, as if that exists somewhere. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
What I do know is none of it is actual words. It's all riffraff and frumerole in the background. It's like people are standing back there saying raffle, 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 right? They're not actually saying words. The sounds in the street could easily be overlaid to downtown Chicago today with like sirens and freaking distant gunshots and stuff like that. And it's supposed to be a whole gangster era with superheroes, apparently, because there's at least one dude who can catch on fire and another guy that turns into sand. So
yeah, what character is the fire guy supposed to be? I meant to ask you that.
I'm not sure, and I'm sure somebody.
I'm thinking, is this like Pyro from the X-Men? Is that what I'm looking at?
But I don't know who the DC comparison is.
I was drawing a blank on that guy. He was fire guy, and they didn't do much of a job of explaining who that was, which I think they would do well to explain some of this stuff. And also going back to the music, why can't you just use actual songs from the period? It would be so helpful for the viewer's sense of
they're
immersion.
copyright free.
I know, but would it really cost all that much to grab a Bing Crosby song from 1936? I don't think it would. I don't think it's that big of a deal, and it would be so helpful, and you wouldn't have electric guitars popping off in the third verse, because I'm sorry,
that was AI.
That ruins my suspension of disbelief and takes me right out of the piece. I think that's terrible.
You and I once had a conversation backstage about the scene in A Knight's Tale where the music goes from being medieval to being modern mid-musical number. and
Yeah.
how excellently it was performed, so well that you didn't even really realize it was happening until it was already over and you'd been tapping your feet to it for a few minutes. This, exact opposite, completely the other way around. It's so disjointing to have you start with the Speakeasy Singer and end with like I don't even know what to call it. It's not even modern hip hop or anything like that. It's just some random generic AI version of an old song.
And it's totally incongruous compared to the everything in the song that came before. It's like, I don't even know what the best metaphor to use, but it's like being directly yanked out of the piece and the period that they're trying to immerse you in. But when the goddamn electric guitars and synthesizers start,
it's like going from cool jazz to hairband music without anybody telling you that it was going to happen.
It right? Is. It's not unlike that.
You're sitting around with like a really cool cat who's sitting around with a really cool voice and she's singing to you and it's real cool, man. And then the next thing you know, it's over here going, just almost trying to croon, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make it there.
Yeah, just like the whole piece doesn't work in general. Like they are trying to emulate a thing, but they are squeamish about going all the way and doing what it takes to actually emulate it faithfully.
Right. And so what you end up with is a pale comparison. But like I said, it might be enough to get a handful of young people who have never heard of noir or haven't encountered the noir style to look at it and go, oh, well, that's kind of cool, and go find out what noir actually is. And maybe we'll get some good directors out of this.
Yeah, and that's the best of all possible results. And just like I was talking about with Star Trek in the monologue, that how many physicists and scientists and engineers and designers did Star Trek produce just because people wanted to grow up and try to build the devices they saw on this show. So it's kind of a different version of the same thing. If some young people just by hearing the word noir, if they get curious enough to look up what the genre looked like, what it sounded like, how it was made, the stars that it produced, the wonderful all-time great pictures that it produced, then that's a good and proper thing. And hopefully it will produce some good directors who are visionaries, or backward visionaries, if you want to call it that, who actually think that period and that genre is worth revisiting and remaking films in that same idiom, and that would be wonderful. I think
there's room for it now.
Yeah. And those movies are not hard to find. They are any streaming service you have, they are on there.
When so first there was the silver screen and everything was in that really glaringly limelight, caked up makeup and all of that, and then there was movies and TV, and this transition was a dual technological revolution. Around the time color came into movies, the TV became generally available, priced at a price point where, you know, groups could get together and buy one.
And that was the one place where people were, almost all of them were still watching black and white, even years after movies transitioned to color.
Which is why when the movies transitioned to color and the existence of the noir, the whole noir concept kind of just died on the steps of Technicolor. The only surviving ration of it was the TV, TV space. At this point, there are so many streaming services doing so much with so little that some clever filmmakers could very easily find a niche in doing strong noir films. Because imagine if Tarantino had decided, because a lot of his sets are set up in like noir styles, like reminiscent,
and he is a big fan of shooting on old film formats with old lenses, so he would be the guy.
Right. But he never actually took that step into a committed actual noir project. Instead,
Yeah.
he put in the suggestions of noir in things like The Hateful Eight, with the scene of Samuel L. Jackson standing in the snow in his black coat. It's not noir, but it really feels like it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And if you tried to make that picture in that idiom, it would be fucking awesome. It would
Yeah,
be
it would work.
awesome as hell. Yeah,
It would
it
work.
would work.
Can you
flawlessly.
imagine? You imagine the chick that was playing the guitar, the one that they're all there for in the first place, the scene where she's got her nose busted up and gets thrown down in the snow right in front of the wagon stopping.
Uh-huh.
Dude, the red on the snow wouldn't be there. That would be black.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
wagon's not green, it's black. The cover's not brown, it's white. That's just as white as the snow. And the stark contrast is amazing.
There actually was quite a bit of overlap in the in the early and mid 30s between film noir and the Western. And it's a shame that those two genres didn't have more time in which they could coalesce, because there was a lot of fertile ground there.
Also into the superhero genre very early. The old Superman and the early what was the other one? I had it in my head. Anyway, the early Supermans would have several episodes exploring different things, and then they'd have a straight up like film noir episode, because all of that was done in black and white originally, and so it wasn't even a stretch for them to do it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking specifically, since we were talking about the Twilight Zone before, a really good example that I think most people watching us will have seen is the episode with William Shatner on the airplane. I think it's called Terror at 30,000 feet.
Oh God, I love that one.
That is an absolute hot steaming slice of film noir. Straight up, you couldn't do it any better. And it's from what,
There's
1963, 64. And I know, and it's freaking brilliant.
The psychology involved in all of that. Okay, let's assume the gremlin's real, right? He's the only one seeing it, trying to tell everybody, and they just think he's crazy. Let's assume he's hallucinating. There is no gremlin, but he's still freaking out and trying to tell everybody, and he's actually crazy. Or, and here's the weirdest part, what if the gremlin's real, but not actually in this reality, and he's seeing over into a separate reality? Twilight Zone's fucking great, dude.
Yep. Yeah, and it's great because it asks us the question and it doesn't give us the answer. And there is so much value in not giving the answer, in not insulting the audience's intelligence and thinking the audience needs its handheld, but just present the thing you're presenting, pose the questions, and let the audience take it from there. And that's the way you wind up making well-liked products that don't insult people. And it's
right.
It's not rocket
and that's
surgery.
Important. That's important. Look at Bud Light, right? Bud Light, and for whatever reason you want to put behind it, took a risk. They attempted something that had never been done with their brand before, and it was the worst thing that's happened in the past 25 years to not just that company, but several associated industries suffered. So, sometimes these efforts are misplaced, and sometimes they're not. When it comes to that type of brand recognition, you've got to be careful where you put it, because if you stick it in the wrong spot and you get memed into oblivion, you're liable to lose a little bit.
Oh, you're liable to bring down a damn empire.
Which is basically what happened. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Anheuser-Busch also associated with the Artois folks? I think Artois sold them a couple of months ago.
I believe, yeah. And ever since the Dylan Mulvaney thing happened, which was spring of 2023, if I'm not mistaken, Modelo immediately became the top selling beer in the country, as it has remained, and Bud Light hasn't come anywhere close to recovering from that.
Weirdly enough, here it was Dos Equis.
Oh, was it? Yeah, it's bound to be something.
That was apparently a very local effect. I don't know why.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah, Modelo and Dos Equis, probably Corona. Those are your top selling Mexican beers in the U.S. Maybe Jalisco sells a lot around here. I don't know how much that's true in other parts of the country though. But yeah, it would be those four. It would be Corona, Jalisco, Modelo, Dos Equis, and then I don't think I could name very many other Mexican. Except I guess Negra Modelo isn't separate from Modelo. So yeah, I can't really even name many Mexican beers beyond those four. But they all did a hell of a lot better after the Bud Light Dylan Mulvaney incident.
I'll tell you something else that benefited. Japanese beer, Korean beer.
Yeah. Yep.
Suddenly, and this was the weirdest thing, in the places where there was once Bud Light, Budweiser, you would find the Budweiser stacked smaller and stacked out in the aisle over there, not in the cooler. And
I know.
There would be some weird craft option, some foreign option, and then some Asian option over here. There'd be like a Canadian, English or something. I don't know. I don't know what they were. I don't drink beer, but I did notice that transition take place.
And I'll never forget when I first realized how severe that backlash was really going to be, when I would start going into convenience stores and in the beer cooler, the Bud Light was no longer right there at eye level in the spot that it normally occupies forever and ever and ever. All of a sudden, it was way up on the top shelf or way down at the bottom shelf, and it had been supplanted by Modelo, Dos Equis, what have you. And that's the moment when you were able to say, wow, they really screwed themselves something fierce here, didn't they? Because what are you gonna do if you're a convenience store owner when all of a sudden nobody is buying this one brand of beer? You're not gonna continue giving it pride of place in the most prominent spot in the beer cooler. You're gonna move it somewhere else that befits the number of units that are actually being sold. And man, that was, if you had come to me in the spring of 2023, but before the whole thing happened, the day before the thing happened, and you had told me 60 days from now, Bud Light is no longer going to be the number one beer sold in the United States, I would have told you that you were on crack and hallucinating. There's absolutely no way that can possibly happen, but they found a way to make it happen. And
so I knew it was a solid freaking flash in the pan, like a big hoofla. When I walked in to my local convenience store over here, and they had Bud Light stacked from just inside the door where you could get a wheelchair through, but only just, all the way to the coffee. Just hot Budweiser, as far as the eye could see.
Yep.
And I stopped and stood there. And the guy behind the counter, I've known, small town, I've known him for years. I don't know him personally, but we talk. And I looked at him and I went, they fucked up, right? And he's like, they really fucked up. I was like, okay, and walked around them. And they basically started raffling those damn things off. They couldn't give them away hardly.
The stuff became so worthless, they didn't even bother putting it in the cooler anymore. And that speaks pretty damn loudly about what a gigantic self-own that was on the part of Anheuser-Busch.
About a month into that whole debacle, I had a buddy of mine come in from out of town, and he asked me to meet him at a bar over here. And I walked in and sat down, and there was people I know. I'm from here. Everybody knows me. I know them. I went in and sat down. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? What's happening? The guy walks in, my buddy, he's from the West Coast, California. He walks in, plops down. He's only going to be here for a couple of hours. He's like, hey, what's going on? You want a beer? I'm like, nah. He's like, Bud Light. And the guy at the end of the bar said, what the fuck are you, a woman? And he looked at me and looked at that guy. And this dude's 6'6", 385 pounds, looked like he was carved out of ebonite. I was like,
that was the amazing
John
thing
Henry.
about it. Almost overnight, buying Bud Light became something akin to buying porn. It was something you couldn't do in public in polite company without inviting embarrassment. And
yeah,
man, what a feat of unintentional marketing disaster infliction.
But was it? I don't know, dude. I don't know. I've been looking back at a lot of things that have happened from from the way DEI was kind of forced down the throats by way of insinuating it into all of the representation in all of the colleges and then all of the schools and then all of the local and then all of the federal. It became sort of a top-down approach to try to insert inclusion into everything by force, right? If you look at the things over the past few years that have happened to sort of wake up the common public to realize that, wait a second, nobody's voting for this shit. They're just doing it, right? Nobody voted to send money to Taiwan for transgender underwater basket weaving studies. Like, no one does this. They're waking up to that, and they're starting to look around, like the Somali scams. And, there's a couple of other scams I'm aware of, but I can't prove it. Mattress stores. There is no reason on earth we need so many fucking mattress stores. There has to be a scam associated with it. Stop laughing at me. I'm serious.
Mattress Warehouse, Mattress City, Mattress Outlet, Mattress Superstore.
You get on the interstate, there's 3 on every fucking exit. What in the world? Who sleeps that much?
You do raise a fair point, because how the fuck often do you actually buy a mattress? How many mattresses have I bought in my entire life? Maybe 3 or 4?
Right? So who's buying all these mattresses? It has to be a cover for something. I have a theory, and I want you to stick with me on this one. I think the CIA operates the mattress stores to give them cover locations near all of the exits on all of the interstates, and poof, there you go. Perfect entry and exit for virtually anything. Dude, if you open up a mattress store across the street from a goddamn bank, you could tunnel into that bank with nobody ever bothering you at all, because no one ever goes into a fucking mattress store. I've done it. I went into one. The guy looked at me like I was fucking crazy. Yeah. He talked to me as if I wasn't supposed to be there.
And yet you will often see strip malls on the side of the freeway along the frontage roads that they have 2 or 3 mattress stores directly next to each other. And one finds oneself thinking, how many goddamn customers does each of those mattress stores get that actually supports their existence? And it's
that's not what I wonder. That's not what I wonder at all. I'm wondering what the fuck they're smuggling in under cover of moving mattresses that actually pays for the overhead.
You're wondering what the mattresses are actually stuffed with, is what you're wondering.
I mean, I happen to know a little bit of that underworld drug math if you want to get into it. I'm just saying it's time for you to do that thing.
It is time for me to do that thing. Where does the time go? I don't know where the time goes, but it sure does fly by quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius tonight. We sure had a good time. Hope you had a good time too. Hope you enjoyed all of the wide-ranging discussion about things we don't like, things we do like, things we might like in the future, things we've stopped liking. We'll have more such discussion next week. You know the time and the place, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, same curmudgeon time, same Sasquatch channel. Have yourself a fantastic tomorrow and a great day after, and an edifying remainder of your week. We will see you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
This one's for you, buddy. Nice.